On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk a little bit about Black Hat and some of the sessions there and how your iPhone actually might be vulnerable. Plus, we talk a little bit about educating our workforce on the next generation tech. Plus, Brian also gets into how Apple and Google are taking a step back and allowing you to stop having them listen to your data. Plus, Brian and I talk with Jeff Schmidt, CEO of Ignited, about educating the next generation of innovators. Twiat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 354, recorded August 9th, 2019. Ignited STEM. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's advanced technology center is like no other testing and research lab with more than $500 million of equipment, including OEMs like Dell EMC, and it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and get insights into all that it offers, go to www.com/twit. And by Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. It's back for its third season, and this time it's all about the epic history of programming languages. Episode 4 tells the origins and evolution of Perl. Go to redhat.com/heroes or listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Welcome to Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. Let's bring in the expert. Let's bring in an expert, my friend and our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee, Director of Advanced Network Computer Laboratory in Honolulu. Cheebert, it seems like you are the lone survivor of Black Hat.
Yeah, and I actually was going to go to Black Hat, but things kind of started collapsing as far as funding at the university. So I had to beg off, even though I had a room to share, which is kind of sad. I really wanted to go to Black Hat.
You've had a nice vacation, though, this past week, right?
Yeah, I was actually playing tourist with our friends Tim Titus and family. And it was actually my first time to go to the Pacific Aviation Museum and see some amazing old warbirds, including the ruptured duck, which was the B-25 Mitchell that Doolittle and his company used to do a raid off an aircraft carrier in Tokyo.
Very nice, very nice. Well, it's always nice. It's always nice to get off a couple of days. But speaking of Black Hat, we had a nice feed of information of those sessions coming from our friends who went there, and we're going to actually cover some of those in some of our blitz and maybe the bites. Plus, we're going to talk about the need for skilled workers as part of the next industrial revolution. Plus, maybe those skills might not be readily available to pick up. Plus, you and I are actually going to go talk about the latest news about how Apple and Google have provided ways for you actually to opt out from them collecting that data and actually reviewing that data periodically from your voice assistants. Plus, we actually have a great guest, Jeff Schmidt, CEO of Ignited, to talk about the education of our future generations. But before we get into all that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, if you follow Black Hat, you know it's a treasure trove of great information about the security of the internet. Now, this past week, researchers presented targeted consumer messaging apps and services like WhatsApp. Now, as you may know, WhatsApp actually uses end-to-end encryption for its messages. Now, end-to-end encryption really is one of the most secure ways to communicate privately and securely online by encrypting messages at both ends of the conversation. End-to-end encryption really prevents anyone in the middle from reading your private communication. Now, this means that even Facebook can't read them. Sounds great, right? Well, leave it to the researchers and hackers to figure out that this can also be an exploited bug, not a feature. Now, in this particular in-chat hack, since Facebook can't intervene, a hacker can use some of the features of the service to fabricate messages. Now, this is a simple hack, not an easy one, but a simple one that exploits the web app version of WhatsApp. Now, it first starts by exploiting the feature that allows users to pair their phone using a QR code. Now, the researchers used the public and private key created before the QR code and the client secret sent from the phone when they scan the QR code to actually then monitor and decrypt communications on the fly. So basically, they found a way to get the keys to the kingdom. Now, the hackers can get details like participant information, the actual conversation, and a unique ID on the conversation. Plus, hackers can spoof message replies, alter message content, and even manipulate the chat by sending a message back to a sender on behalf of the other person as if it would come from them. Now, sound like fun to you? Well, researchers said that most people who just have that kind of one-on-one conversation over WhatsApp will have a really low risk of this hack, but people in a group chat we're at a high risk. So if you're chatting with your coworkers or your friends in a group chat, you're more likely to be a target. Now, let's hope Facebook finds a way to patch this issue soon, or users will have even more of a reason not to trust their apps.
Well, okay. This is going to be, first off, apologies to our friends, AT&T friends in the chat room. But sadly, it seems some of your outsourced colleagues have decided they wanted more. A Pakistani man bribed AT&T call center employees to install malware and unauthorized hardware as part of a scheme to fraudulently unlock cell phones, according to U.S. Department of Justice. Mohammed Fawd, 34, was extradited from Hong Kong to the U.S. on Friday and is detained pending trial. An indictment alleges that Fawd recruited and paid AT&T insiders to use their computer credentials and access to disable AT&T's proprietary locking software that prevented ineligible phones from being removed from AT&T's network. According to the Department of Justice, the scheme resulted in millions of phones being removed from the AT&T service and/or payment plans, costing the company millions of dollars. Fawd allegedly paid the insiders hundreds of thousands of dollars, paying one co-conspirator $428,500 over the 5-year scheme. In all, AT&T insiders received more than $1 million in bribes from Fawd and his co-conspirators, who fraudulently unlocked more than 2 million cell phones, the government alleged. 3 former AT&T customer service reps from a call center in Bothell, Washington, already pleaded guilty and agreed to pay back the money to AT&T. Sadly, this kind of action also makes it dramatically easier for stolen phones to have value on the black market.
Talking more about exploits to systems, Chee, again from Black Hat this week, we're hearing about how hackers can actually hijack your iPhone without actually having access to it. Now, usually when you think of hacks like this, they start with like a malicious link that you mistakenly click on, and then it causes you to download something like a fraudulent app, which actually lets hackers in. Well, unfortunately, this is a bit scarier of a hack, because from Black Hat Talk titled "Look, No Hands: The Remote Interactionless Attack Surface of the iPhone," it actually focuses on the iOS iMessage app and how it can be exploited to allow hackers to gain control of your device. Now, interactionless iOS bugs are highly sought after because they are, by exploit vendors and nation-state hackers, because they actually make it easy to compromise a target's device without actually requiring any buy-in from their victim. Now, the 6 vulnerabilities found on iOS and iMessage can potentially be worth millions or even tens of millions of dollars on the exploit market. Now, you might wonder, how can iMessage be exploited? Well, it all starts with the fact that iMessage is a complicated app, creating really a large surface area for possible bugs that can be exploited. And in this case, some of the vulnerabilities an attacker can send a crafted message to you, and the iMessage server would send specific user data back, like the content of their SMS message or images. You wouldn't even have to open your iMessage app for the attack to work. Now, iOS has protections in place that can actually usually block this type of attack. However, because this attack or hack takes advantage of the system's underlying logic, iOS defenses interpret it as a legitimate and intended action. Now, what's the best thing you can do to protect yourself against interactionless attacks? Well, you got it. Apple has fixes for some of them already, so keep your phone and operating system up to date. Cheebert, do you update your devices regularly?
All the time. Of course, I usually do one iDevice before the other, just in case it bricks one of them. Sadly, yet another problem with ill-behaved corporations. Google has a problem with pregnant workers, according to an employee memo. Discriminating or retaliating against employees for becoming or being pregnant is against the law. Unfortunately, like so many other kinds of discrimination, it's still far too common to find in the workplace, and a Google employee says the problem is alive and well there too. The employee, perhaps soon to be a former employee, described her experiences in a memo obtained and published by Vice Motherboard. Quote, "I'm not returning to Google after maternity leave, and here's why," the memo begins. The employee writes that after several years as a high performer with a strong track record within the company, she was promoted to manage a small team of her own about 18 months ago. At one point after my promotion, my director/manager started making inappropriate comments about a member of my team, including that the Googler was likely pregnant again and was overly emotional and hard to work with when pregnant, she writes. I, for one, would like to remind folks that in this day of equal opportunity, we are all too often seeing various types of discrimination in the workforce. The one I see most commonly is one of age discrimination, where too often the most senior workers are somehow laid off and find it extremely hard to work again. My wife kept running into this brick wall and finally decided to retire early.
Now, we all know WordPress. I use it for my sites, plus they are a sponsor, and WordPress sites account for a really large percentage of the internet's surface area. While the developers at WordPress are on a mission to ensure their open source content management system is secure and up to date for everyone in their ecosystem. Now, this is a noble goal, but might not be as easy to accomplish. Now, they are working on a plan to forcibly update older versions. Now, if you remember, WordPress makes up for more than 34% of all websites on the internet. Now, that's a lot of surface area to take care and keep secure. Now, to give some context, the current officially supported versions include only the last 6 WordPress major releases, which include everything between 4.7 and version 5.0. Now, if you remember, an auto update happened in the other parts of the computer industry with people's machines auto updating to Windows 10. Let's hope that this plan works out better for them. Now, the plan for this program is actually to slowly auto-update old WordPress sites, starting with version 3.7 to the current minimum supported version, which is 4.7. Now, they're going to actually do this in stages. So they're going to do it a little differently than Windows did it. Now, they're going to do it where they actually say the first stage is to go and 2% of all WordPress that are on 3.7 will actually be auto-updated to 3.8. And then after a week, another 18% will be updated to 3.8. And then after 2 weeks, 80% will be updated. And then they'll actually repeat those steps over and over again, migrating sites from 3.8 to 3.9, 3.9 to 4.0, and so on and so forth until they actually hit 4.7. Now, this is not a direct update to 4.7. And more of a gradual progression through different versions. It will actually hopefully reduce the different error cases. Now, if only a few individual sites break, then those sites will be rolled back to their previous releases and the owner will be notified via email. Now, if the plan was to try and update to 4.7 directly, millions of WordPress site owners could potentially experience downtime with their bad white screen of death errors. Now, these errors could be caused by incompatibilities between themes, plugins, and the newer WordPress core version. Now, another thing that WordPress team is doing is allowing site owners to actually opt out of the forced update. Now, these owners will also be made aware that their sites will still be vulnerable and potential to target hackers if they don't update. Now, the reason behind the WordPress dev team's desire to forcibly update older versions of the CMS to the new one is also because of manpower. Because the past 6 years, WordPress actually has been backporting every single security patch for all versions going back to WordPress 3.7. Now, this is really not a scalable model, and the dev team is looking to reduce the time required to maintain the platform. Also, get security fixes out faster. Now, let's hope that they're successful, because WordPress is one of the most targeted CMSs today, mainly due to its broad adoption and large attack surface. Now, if nothing else, this will help reduce that attack surface and maybe even get some of those malware bot attacks off our backs.
You know, I seem to be doing a lot of stories about phones. Oh, well. Here we go. A Russian attack group uses phones and printers to breach corporate networks. Microsoft reports Russian state-sponsored attack group Strontium, also known as APT28, and Fancy Bear is using a popular Internet of Things device to breach enterprise networks and elevate privileges. So back in April, researchers with the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center noticed infrastructure belonging to Strontium communicating with and attempting to compromise external devices, including a voice-over IP phone, office printer, and video decoder across multiple customer locations. Quote, these devices became points of ingress from which the actor established a presence on the network and continued looking for further access, unquote, the Microsoft Security Response Team writes in a blog post. Once on the network, the actor could do a network scan to seek other insecure devices that then let them move across the environment in search of more privileged accounts and higher value data. With access to each of these devices, they ran TCP dump to sniff network traffic on local subnets. Microsoft also saw them noting administrator groups to further broaden their access. As they moved through targeted networks, actors would drop a shell script to establish persistence so they could continue their exploitation. The devices they compromised were seen communicating with an external command and control server, researchers were reporting. However, because the attacks were identified early, they have not determined Strontium's motivation in this activity. So in the last 12 months, Microsoft has issued nearly 1,400 nation-state alerts to victims of Strontium activity, while 20% of these notifications related to attacks on non-government institutions. 80% of Strontium's attacks are focused at the government, IT, military defense, medicine, education, and engineering. Well, apologies to HP, but I got to take a pot shot at your policy of dumping driver and firmware support for not so very old printers, forcing users to continue using old and potentially vulnerable firmware.
Well, a little bit of market news here. I like to hear deals like these because it really ensures that continuous competition in the market. Now, it looks like AMD has landed a really big deal with Google and Twitter to place AMD's latest and greatest server chip in their data centers. Now, AMD's EPYC CPUs have landed as a direct competitor to Intel's offering. Now, currently, Intel actually maintains a pretty steady 90% of data center market control. Now, this deal will have Google using AMD's second-generation EPYC servers chip in Google's internal data centers. Plus, Google will also offer these type of systems to external developers as part of its cloud offering later this year. Now, Intel, which makes chips in its own factories instead of relying on contractors, is behind schedule delivering chips made with its newer manufacturing process. Now, it plans to release them next year, but that might just be too late here. And this is where a bit of strategy is coming from AMD. AMD is taking that as an advantage and courting some of Intel's biggest customers, such as Google. Now, this deal steals some low single-digit market share from Intel, but it's significant enough for the stock market to notice and for Intel to actually work on a response and a new timeline. Now, no matter what, good for you, AMD. Keep the competition fluid and get the market to adjust along with it. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But first, before we get to the bites, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Worldwide Technology. Now, if you ever get a chance to visit the Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center, you should go because it's a truly amazing center. They began building it 10 years ago, and it's really grown exponentially. It really is like no other testing and research lab out there. Now, listen to what it contains. The lab contains more than $500 million in equipment. $500 million. This includes systems from hundreds of OEMs and key partners ranging from heavyweights like Dell, EMC, VMware, and Intel to emerging disruptors like Tanium, Equinix, and Expanse. Now, WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need to make sure their business runs right. Now, with all that it has to offer, the ATC really is an incubator for IT innovation. Now, listen to what else it has to offer. Now, it has on-demand and schedulable labs like Dell EMC VxRail, Extreme IO X2, and Isilon. Now, these labs represent the newest advances in primary storage. Plus, there are hundreds of labs including multi-cloud, hyper-convergence infrastructure, networking, secondary storage, data analytics, AI, and more. Whew. Now, sometimes you might try and build products before you know about what the industry has to offer to help. Well, the ATC can actually help you learn about products before you launch. Now, WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly actually spin up proofs of concepts and pilots using the sandbox so customers can confidently select the best solution. Now, in many cases, this actually reduces concept time from months to weeks, which actually increases your speed to market. Now, they offer lab as a service as a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Now, here customers can actually perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has built. Now, it's virtual, so you can actually take full advantage of ATC and the unique benefits there anywhere in the world 24/7. Now, WWT engineers work in these labs every day, beta test new equipment and building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make the right decisions and see results faster and with much less investment. And many have been eagerly awaiting, and the timeline is finally here. WWT has launched their new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem actually creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for their customers, and get access articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about WWT and join the ATC ecosystem, go to wwt.com/twit and create an account today. WWT simplifies the complex. That's wwt.com/twit. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank Worldwide Technology for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, we all know that staying up on the latest scientific and technical and industry advancements is kind of difficult, right? It's one of those difficult tasks. You're already working. It's really tough to kind of find where you need to go and how you need to learn. Now, up-and-comers from college and other avenues, they're actually learning the latest and greatest most of the time. But individuals in the workforce really have a challenge every day. They're trying to find methods of staying up to date, to stay relevant in today's marketplace. Now, listen to this stat. More than 7 million jobs in the U.S. remain unfilled as employers really struggle to find workers with the right mix of skills. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of open things. And where are they going to find the information? How are they going to get skilled for that? Now, as we enter what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution, the skill gap is actually widening. Now, experts told attendees of this latest gathering that this needs to be addressed to basically empower the next workforce of tomorrow. And public-private partnerships have become a popular way for corporations, schools, government agencies, and others to fill the latest pipeline. Now, let's talk about movement here. Policymakers and industry leaders and other stakeholders gathered in Washington, D.C. on May 22nd for the U.S. News Workforce of Tomorrow conference. Now, where they discussed many ways to actually work together, help improve education and workforce development to make sure the U.S. stays competitive in this rapidly changing world. Now, they went over a numerous set of topics. Let's talk about a couple of them, and then I want to throw this to Chee because I know he has some views here. Now, the first couple topics they covered here, they first covered training and empowering the current workforce for the next industrial revolution. Good topic. They also talked about developing a diverse talent pool, improving diversity in the workforce of tomorrow, requiring multifaceted approach, combining mentoring, professional development, outreach, and educational programs at all levels. Plus, they're talking about retooling learning programs that not only focus on STEM skills, but also critical thinking, creativity, and teamwork, and also ways or solutions to allow for adoption across all states rather than a plan for just a single state, and ways to actually scale the program. Now, I want to first throw this actually only over to you, Chee, but I do have some thoughts that I want to come back to me later. But I want to talk to you about, is this a good, they actually talked about some good stuff here. Is this the only way they can get people in the relevant world to be up to date in the latest degrees?
I'm actually kind of contrary. I'm big fan of STEM education. I'm a big fan of higher education. I think we need to have better trained people that are critical thinkers. However, I do also have to admit I'm a huge fan of Mike Rowe and his push to get more of our school children, more of our people into trades. We've got a lot. We're running out of people that actually know how to do blue collar work. Germany had a huge program to do exactly this, and it's done them a lot of good in the manufacturing sector. but there's a lot of unevenness in how we handle education after we get out of high school. Not everybody should be in a university program. Let's say that right now. There are a lot of people that I've met in a higher education community that really shouldn't be there. Their head's just not there. Those are the types that I think should probably get that micro trade education. But once you start getting into the people that should be in academia, I start wondering whether or not we're giving some mixed messages. So like, for instance, let's use my university as an example. We have the highest paid workers at any major university is almost always the football coach. And it's not that their university income is so high, it's their additional income from the boosters. However, in almost every major university that I know of, the whole concept of a booster suddenly is illegal for scientists and researchers. What happened? Why is there some inequity? Those are some of the topics that I think this workforce of the future needs to start talking about. Are we giving the wrong message? Are we emphasizing athletics and athleticism over knowledge, or should we have more of a balance? That's my rant. Cheebert's soapbox is now over.
Now, I know that some organizations, they can afford to essentially send people back to training, or they bring in consultants or trainers, and sometimes they actually send people back to school to kind of learn new advanced topics. But that's not actually all organizations, because a lot of them can't afford it. And my guess is it's not even part of that 7 million set of people that are out there. So it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, some organizations just can't afford to do this. Now, what I do know is actually there are some areas that are offering meetup style community driven material, like in training. Like, for instance, the local JavaScript or local Python group is teaching analytics and so on and so forth. Now, it does bring people in like experts from the industry or university to come in and actually teach these kind of like multi-week trainings, and have people kind of go and do test experiments and some, and bring that stuff back to the class. So that is helpful, but it's super cool, but it's not enough, because not every area has experts like this, and not everyone offers this type of thing, and it's not always the most relevant to what they're trying to learn. So I don't know if there's a really easy way to do this, especially maybe even at the multi-state kind of complete countrywide side of things. But Cheeber, I do want to throw this back to you, because a lot of times we're seeing that in order to get some of these individuals that know some of this material, especially STEM skill workers, organizations are actually going outside the U.S. to find these skilled workers to bring them in. Is this a good approach?
It's both good and bad. If the corporations need them, they're going to have to get them wherever they can. Do I think we should be filling it more from our American universities? Yeah. Have I talked to some of these recruiters? Yes, I have. And sadly, they're more and more being disappointed with the students that are coming out of these major universities as being out of touch with what the industry really needs. So yeah, I'm waffling on this because I want to support U.S. academics, but I see as recruiters saying, but where are those skills? Why is a computer science student unable to tell me what a layer 3 device is when they're going for a networking job? There's a lot of problems with that. My only suggestion to any legislator or congressman or whoever that's listening to me is make it easier. Create some sort of mechanism through some sort of organization. Make it easier for professional organizations to get their 501c3 status. Right now, they have to grow to a certain point where they can afford to hire a lawyer to get registered. Have the Small Business Administration start doing something where you can create the 501c3 or some sort of other small business, business type of protection so that you can have professional organizations where you have the protection, but make it easier to do. A lot of corporations will not volunteer their technical staff to work on professional organizations unless there is that liability and whatever protection of 501c3.
Right. Well, I actually hope someone is actually listening out there, because really removing roadblocks is definitely a really good strategy to allow organizations to really make those better decisions and help their workforce. But let's go ahead and put that one to bed, because I do want to get to the next bite, Chubert, that you're going to go through. And that's actually Apple and Google actually taking a step back here and retooling how they deliver and handle data. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, remember, everybody has to remember, we did a news story not too terribly long ago about how a Google contractor in Belgium leaked 1,000 voice recordings to a news agency. And, that's horrible. Everybody thought, oh, my privacy's been broached. And to say the backlash was epic is an understatement. So anyway, Apple workers apparently are now not listening to Siri queries worldwide, in a statement from Apple this week. So Apple does plan to bring back human reviews of Siri voice recordings at some unspecified date, but the company said it will only review them when customers specifically opt in to the practice. Separately, Google the other day confirmed that it recently paused human reviews of Google Assistant queries worldwide. Anyway, let's start getting to the bottom of this. The reason why anyone with a voice assistant needs to have reviews is a concept called grading. When someone goes and asks for the Amazon Echo to do something, how many times have you asked your Amazon Echo, turn on the living room lights, and they don't? And you have to do it 2 or 3 times. I know my wife gets very frustrated when the Amazon Echo doesn't listen to her. Well, wouldn't it be nice if your Amazon Echo or Siri device or Google device got better over time? And that's what grading is all about. The human reviewers will go and look for patterns. They'll go and listen to recordings and say how well they actually the AI interpreted that command. And that's all part of training the AI. Sorry, we don't have HAL 9000 yet. It's going to take a while to get there. And the learning process means we have to be willing to have grading done so that the AI systems can slowly get better at it. Now, when you start doing this in America, English-speaking countries, the Amazon Echo, Google, and Siri all work really well. Unfortunately, that's it. But what about German-speaking or Flemish-speaking or French-speaking or Russian-speaking? We're all, unfortunately, we don't have direct translation. So Google and all these other folks want to be able to do grading, but because of this one contractor, it became a big deal. So I'm sure you've been playing with some sort of AI, Lou, and training is a really big deal of any AI system. How do you feel about your contributions to the grading process? Does it creep you out? Do you like it? What do you think?
It's interesting because a lot of times you opt into these things, right? I mean, they sometimes during your setup, they ask you. I think I remember when you used to set up the Kinect, there used to be like the Microsoft Kinect on the Xbox. I remember, now that they don't have it anymore, it doesn't really matter. But a lot of times they used to ask you, hey, check this box or uncheck this box to allow us to use some of your data to help improve the system. And so, you kind of going through that process and having them be transparent about it while you go through it is actually better, because it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable to know, I kind of gave them the permission to do that. So it makes sense that there's maybe a human on the other side of there listening to this. I just think it's also the way it was leaked that really kind of caused this issue. But I think you're right.
Yeah.
Training is a really important thing that comes with AI. I mean, I was just talking about in the chat room that we don't necessarily have AI to train AI just yet, right? So we don't have the HAL 9000s. We don't have a way for it to. There are methods out there today where AI is actually altering its models using AI. So there is a way of a self-consumption model, but in this case, especially in voice to text, there's not really a good model for it just yet. So a lot of these companies out there, they have humans to do that work. Just make sure they give a grade, like you said, they grade whether the whether the audio was clear and that the model just didn't pick it up or interpret it correctly. And again, only really as good as your weakest link. So if you farm this out to vendors or to other companies that don't necessarily have the most stake or vested interest in this, or especially in privacy and security, you could have leaks like this. You could have leaks like this, which could be damning and damaging to your business. So I definitely think it's important. I definitely go back to your question. I do think that grading is important, and that I don't find it very creepy when I'm offering that information personally, when I actually opt into the process.
Yeah, but don't you think that maybe, just maybe, it would feel less creepy if you knew that there is like a time limit to how long they store your recordings? Wouldn't you like them to automatically delete after a certain amount of time?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, I was thinking about this the other day, and I think it actually would be cool that if right when you gave a command or said something, they would actually say, hey, this is the one that we're going to use. We're tagging this one. Are you okay with us doing that? Like, I think it would be cool if you've opted into this process and they like add some kind of tag or some moniker or some way for you to know that last command that maybe the system thought wasn't very clear or whatnot, they're going to use that information. And then you can say, no, I don't want that because there was maybe some background noise or some things that that I want being heard. Like, I think that would be a better model than even what you're talking about. I think it would just allowing more transparency really helps them. Now, again, they might not do that because that might restrict even more data coming into their flow, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking maybe we also ask our manufacturer friends to consider making that mute button a little more obvious. Make it so that my Amazon Echo Spot on my bedside, that I could fumble around in the dark and know where that mute button is. So if I want to have some privacy, I can fumble in the dark, feel the mute button, click it, so that something private doesn't get recorded. I'm almost thinking it'd be nice if laptops and desk-side assistants were built with shutters instead of having to buy third-party shutters.
Or black electrical tape.
Yeah, black or Post-it notes.
Yeah.
I think I really and truly love voice assistants. I've certainly voted with my dollars. I certainly also have spent money on shutters for my laptop, my Amazon Spot, my Amazon this and that, because I do want to preserve my privacy, and I opt in and opt out using those types of mechanisms. I'm thinking it'd be really, really nice if there was a command on all of these voice assistants where saying, please go into privacy mode, and it would have to be re-enabled with a physical button or something. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a great, again, it's allowing for more transparency, a lot more control of your data, a lot more control of the scenario. So I definitely, anytime you give the control back to the customer, back to the user, it makes it for a more trusting, more transparent, more comfortable feeling from them, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we've flogged this dead horse enough. What do you say we go and hear from our next sponsor and then jump into the guest? Because I think this guest is going to be pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, before we do that, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Command Line Heroes. Now, it's an original podcast from Red Hat. It talks about programming languages and all about how it applies back to the enterprise. Now, in 1999, Perl was a programming language rising to prominence in the world of web development. Fast forward to 2018, Perl makes a list of languages in danger of extinction. Now, Command Line Heroes is back for its third season, and it's all about programming languages, my favorite thing. Now, from C to JavaScript to Ruby to Go, the podcast dives into the origin stories of the most prominent languages around. Now, episode 4 takes a deep dive into the world of Perl. Now explores how it became a crucial player in the early days of web development, and then it goes beyond the hyperbole to show why it continues to stay with us, which actually becomes obvious with a little history and a look at the big picture. Now, Command Line Heroes, an original podcast from Red Hat, is all about the people who transform tech from the command line up. To listen and subscribe, head over to the podcast platform of your choice or visit redhat.com/heroes. And that's redhat.com/heroes. And there you'll find full episodes as well as bonus content. And you can even test your skills on the Command Line Bash arcade game. redhat.com/heroes. And we thank Red Hat for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it brings us to my favorite part of the show. We get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Quiet Riot. And today we have Jeff Schmidt, CEO of Ignited. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Lou and Brian, love the show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Well, we always have, our audience loves to hear about people's journey and their origin stories. Can you maybe take us through your journey through tech and education and what kind of brought you to Ignited?
Yeah. Should I start with the radioactive spider or maybe fast forward from there?
No, that would be definitely a good story.
Well, all right, after the spider bite. So I was going to university, and I was actually set to become an English professor. That was one of my big plans, and I really was inspired by teachers in my high school and before then. But what ended up happening was I got a speeding ticket, and I was living in Texas at the time. And somebody of mine had said, well, you should take the whole day off to pay the speeding ticket and, go to the courthouse and do all that kind of stuff. But it only ended up taking about an hour. So back in the day when they still had university job boards and things like that, I spent the rest of the day looking at university job boards and found this opportunity at Texas Instruments. And I was paying for my own school, so it was a way to sort of think, well, I could dip my toe into business, but I'm still going to be an English professor. Turns out, business is really great that if you dive in and you're good at it, then it gives you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. So what ended up happening for me was I did that first job at Texas Instruments, and then moved to California, was with Quantum, did some time in the storage business, got headhunted into Hewlett-Packard in Europe, was a decade over there doing a lot of sales and sales ops and general management stuff. Then went to eBay in Dublin, Ireland, which was fantastic and lots of good Irish stories. Then came back to the States, ended up doing a lot of amazing work for eBay's 20th anniversary and the PayPal eBay split and all that kind of stuff. Did a little time with Lam Research in the semiconductor business, was most recently at Lockheed Martin. And then after Lockheed, starting this coming Monday, I'm incredibly fortunate to be the new CEO of Ignited, one of the biggest or one of the most well-known nonprofits here around teacher professional development, and really just an amazing organization that's been around for 35 years here in the Valley, doing some amazing work in the education space. So that's the origin story.
Fantastic. Now, we did cover a little bit of the current workforce in our bites today, but maybe you can start off about telling us more about Ignited, how it's really working to inspire the next generation of innovators out there. How is it doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the organization's been around for a long time, 1985. And it kind of started with 12 Bay Area leaders and companies back in the day who said, our science and math education really has some gaps. And, two of the big founding companies were Lockheed and Chevron. And so these leaders got together and they said that teachers are really the focal point. Teachers are these amazing change agents in the classroom and able to really make a difference. So they made the decision to invest steadily in teachers. And so what Ignited really does, and it's done since its beginning, since its origin story, is fund fellowships for teachers into industry over the summer. Right now it's an 8-week, but we do 1-week models. We're looking at different models and give them this firsthand industry experience. And then they take that experience and they take it back into the classroom to inspire kids and tell kids about what they worked on, the people that they met. And our hope moving forward is bring a lot more STEM professionals into those classrooms all year round. So Ignited really has recognized this idea that teachers are really this force multiplier when it comes to having an impact in STEM education. And it's great work that we're continuing. This will be the 35th year, so it's fantastic work.
Absolutely. Now we heard a little bit about the how. Now let's talk a little bit about the what. Now, what are the 21st century skills that people need to learn? Like, why is it so important for students to develop them now?
Yeah, it's a lot of what you guys were talking about earlier on the show. It's things that you might call soft skills. We call them 21st century skills, but it's things like collaboration. And, a good example is you get into a corporate environment, and being a corporate guy myself, you get into an environment and rarely do you do anything on your own. In a lot of education, sometimes in the old days could have been a very isolated, go home and study, get your head in the book and work that way. But that's not translated really well into what we need in the business environment. So if I just take collaboration as an example, you always are working in teams in the corporate environment, as you guys know. So that's something where we're encouraging teachers to see how that works in organizations around the Bay Area, take those lessons back and bring those lessons into the classroom as they add it to their curriculum and lesson plans. And then there's lots of other skills, design thinking, and things that really happen in the real world that are really getting into the classroom in a much bigger way. So there's any number of kind of soft skills that we want to make sure teachers are seeing firsthand.
Makes sense. Now, we know a lot of the magic happens in Silicon Valley and in that area. You said a little bit about some of the organizations that were kind of giving back here, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how some of these firms are assisting in this to help solve the problems of the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because being sort of back in the education space, I would say industry's doing a lot. I'm actually here today at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Education Summit, and we're at NetApp, and there are about 500 people here. Great event that basically talks a lot about that issue where some industries are getting involved directly in the classroom and getting their STEM professionals in the classroom. Some companies are developing their own programs and getting them adopted globally. There's a great program, P-Tech at IBM, that's really a huge scale program to drive a lot of new skills. We were basically hearing from a lot of companies doing a lot of different things. And I can tell you one of the goals of Ignited is to really take this industry coalition and say, could we come up with more of a STEM blueprint so there's a little bit more consistency than there is today? Because I think that is one of the weaknesses in the model is everybody's kind of doing their own thing and it's a little bit decentralized and piecemeal. So that's not really helping as much as it probably could.
Makes sense. Now there are a bunch of programs here, right, that you guys are offering or you're trying to get behind. What are some of the programs? Maybe you can tell us about them.
Yeah, I think the core program for us is our 8-week summer fellowship, and I'll dive into that a little bit and then talk a little bit more about the future and what we're building out. So the fellowship is it's really the ability of the teacher to kind of come in, work on a project in the company itself, have a mentor and work with STEM professionals really directly. And then when that summer experience is over, the teachers will develop curriculum and lesson plans and ideas that they bring directly back into the classroom. And our hope is that, those relationships continue for a longer period of time, because I think Brian was saying it earlier, you want those STEM professionals to come back into the classrooms themselves. That's one of the solutions that we're working on, is how do you keep that year-round engagement? And then we're also building out things like industry-based curriculum, so that in the biotech space or the aerotech space or aerospace areas, how do we make sure that those skills that are a little more industry specific are being taught in our classrooms as well. We're also looking a lot at workforce development and how do we help companies do better planning, because I think the other thing that happens is teachers really were the original workforce developers, and we've kind of lost that mindset over time. And so I think where we want to go with Ignited is, how do we help companies remember that everybody was taught by a teacher? The original talent developers are teachers. And so we're going to be building out a lot of solutions around that and helping companies remember that and do better funnels, better pipelines, better pathways. So some of the things like that are emerging, which are really exciting.
I remember when I was in college, we were required to go to 3 mandatory co-ops, and they're a little bit different than internships because they kind of required you to be paid for number one. Number two is to really just be part of the workforce, and you get to, be ingrained in the process. I did ones for Intel, Anheuser-Busch, Danacorp, which they do, drivetrain work for Ford. And I'll tell you, I learned so much. I learned about the newest, latest, and greatest technologies, processes. And then when I got a job, my real job, that was my, out of college, I can tell you I was already ready. And I learned some things that not even the company knew about. So I think that it sounds like an amazing program. Now, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the companies that are actually offering these.
Yeah, we've been lucky. Historically, we've been around for a while. So there have been 3,800 fellowships. There have been 400 companies that have offered this. It's amazing. It's been across about 760 schools. So there's been a lot of companies who've been involved since the beginning. I think a lot of our current companies, the company I just came from, Lockheed, hosts a number of teachers, but you have Amazon, you have Google, you have Genentech, you have Facebook. So we've got an amazing roster of companies, and that history has spanned 35 years. So the other thing that's super exciting to me is, when you think about a teacher who maybe touches 4,000 students throughout their career, and you think about the impact. For us, we've done the math, and it's really reached about 3.3 million students over our history. And I'm really happy to say, about 1.3 million of those students are from underserved schools and places where maybe kids don't see themselves in these kind of careers. So we definitely have a focus there as well, both with organizations that are forward thinking that way, but also in underserved districts that really need that kind of assistance.
So we heard a little list of companies there. You gave us a list of them. Maybe you can tell us, is there maybe something in common with all of them, or?
I think what a lot of these companies have realized is that there's lots of ways to build your talent pipeline, and I can tell you, coming from industry and coming from a company background, it's really hard. You guys talked about the 7 million, and I think that gap is not getting any better as more industries need these skills. So I think what a lot of these companies have realized is they need multiple solutions to the challenge. And I think a lot of these companies have realized that they have to start working earlier in our educational pipelines. So a lot of them invest in middle school and high school. It's not just about trying to compete for that RF engineer who's graduating from Stanford because the competition is really rough. You need to look back at high school and how you invest in middle schools to get kids really interested. And I think that's where a lot of these companies are more forward thinking and are really making the right kinds of investments. And that's why, one of the reasons I made the leap from the corporate world to the nonprofit world was it's a way to really build the future of this country and build the future of our workforces and our companies. And it's hugely important. So I think that's one of the major things that these companies have in common is they've recognized that they've got to play a more strategic role a little further back in the cycle.
Now, An interesting question here. How do you actually select the teachers to be part of these programs?
Yeah, it's a really it's a straightforward process. We basically get the commitment for the number of fellows every year that a company would like to sponsor, and those are usually in different works and different work teams. Then the company actually outlines a project that they would like the teacher to work on, and if it's multiple teachers, usually it's multiple projects. And then we have relationships with schools all over the Bay Area. And we do active recruiting, essentially. And teachers are really eager to get this experience. So the recruiting part of the equation is fairly straightforward. We always have a lot more teachers interested than we have spots to fill typically. But then we basically let the companies interview the teachers based on the skills that they've requested. So it's a lot like a hiring process. I wouldn't call it that, but it's a lot like a hiring process from the mechanics point of view.
I do want to bring my co-host back in because he has some questions about legislation. Is that right, Jeepert?
Yes, indeed. Ignited sounds spectacular, but I'm sorry, the Silicon Valley area are the people that have a lot of resources. What about those of us that don't have a lot of resources? Is there any kind of lobbying for legislation to help other states, other organizations start up? And do you have suggestions for other states to use as a template?
It's a great question, Brian. I mean, I would say, two quick things. I'll react to the Silicon Valley thing. I would say I've learned that Silicon Valley is not homogenous. So true that if you go to Palo Alto, you've got plenty of resources. Those are the folks who run a lot of these tech companies. But you go to East Palo Alto and it's completely underserved. So I would say we've got some of the same struggles. Silicon Valley is not homogenously prosperous. And so what ends up happening is you get organizations who recognize that and focus companies and industries on those populations and making sure that there's access for all, and that STEM professionals, women, and people from different backgrounds are going into those schools and making sure that women or girls can see women engineers because they may not have it in their family life. So the first thing I would say is the biggest thing that we're going to be focusing on moving forward is getting more STEM professionals back in those classrooms after they've done the fellowships, because you want kids to see, for example, you want girls to see female engineers. That's a big thing. And that's doable in every state. It's doable in every area. Legislatively, I think we've got organizations like the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which is a policy-based organization that champions a lot of education bills. It's really getting policymakers to understand the core issues in their state and continue to advocate and build a coalition. For example, Tony Thurmond, our Secretary of Education, was just here this morning, and he was laughing and saying, I'm just always recruiting. I'm always recruiting people to the cause. So the more companies the more companies and communities and schools can get folks like Tony out there pulling people into the cause of education, I think that's a big way to do it state by state as well. And a quick last thing is learn from other states. One of the projects that we're looking at Ignited is in Colorado. They do a STEM seal on high school diplomas, and they passed legislation. It's got an industry capstone project, and it requires, a certain number of hours and a certain amount of testing. But why can't we bring that legislation to California? So looking out there legislatively what's being done, and then working with organizations to bring successful legislation to places like Hawaii. So those are just a few ideas off the top of my head, but I think there's a lot that can be done.
Or why can't we have a nationwide STEM seal, right?
Exactly.
We need Congress involved. I know all about this. Padre and I, the original hosts, Father Robert Ballister and I, used to do a bunch of charity work through the Jesuit Church, and just going across the train tracks in San Jose, there's a huge gap. But anyway, one of the things that a lot of parents really want to know is I think we can all agree that education really and truly starts in the home. What kinds of things are you seeing that maybe we want to get our parents to encourage to help with in terms of STEM in the home?
Yeah, I think, that's a really interesting question, because I think that it's about parents really understanding what's happening in their school and what's happening as far as existing resources go. I can tell you that my biggest observation over the last couple of years is, at least here in the Valley, there is a ton of STEM activity and opportunity and programs being offered. It's fairly decentralized, so I think we have some work to do to make it a little more collective and understood collectively. But I think a lot of this stuff is out there both nationally and locally. And so part of the call to action for parents is really go out there and look for these opportunities, because I guarantee you they're very likely out there. But then the second part is working with schools and understanding what is your school offering? What is your district offering? And if it's not offering enough, then I think, look to get involved, look to talk about programs that are happening in other places, and talk to your school boards and talk to your administrations, your district administrations, and your policymakers about bringing that to your area. And I'm super excited, because one of the things I love about Ignited, when you focus on teachers and schools, is there's so much opportunity out there. And I want us to play a bigger advocacy role, like you said, Brian, helping other states and helping other communities get some of the same kind of resources we have here in Silicon Valley. So I think there's a lot to be done, and there's a ton of upside to this work.
Well, I think my last question, this is going to be, we typically call it the crystal ball question, but I'm going to rename it as the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand and you could convince Congress to do anything to help STEM education, what would that magic wand wish be?
I'd say, that's so tempting. I'd say recognize that the war for talent's changed. That means that we have to grow new talent pools. Just competing against these successful pockets of talent is not going to work anymore, because, STEM is permeating every industry and every aspect of industry. So how do we look at underserved communities, non-traditional communities? How does everybody that wants a shot at getting a STEM career get a shot? Now, whether they're successful and whether they can get there in the end, to your point earlier, Brian, that's up to them and the support system around them. But if I had the magic wand, I would want people to recognize, let's not just articulate the problems about access. Let's go and look at the system as a whole. Let's look at the enterprise of the educational system, the enterprise mindset, and let's build this into every community, whether they're well-served communities or underserved communities. So if I had a magic wand, I would give everyone as much equal access to this as possible, because I think that's the only way we're going to be successful moving forward.
We've been talking with Jeff Schmidt, CEO of Ignited. Thank you so much for being here. We're running a little low on time. Maybe you can help us find out where people can go to learn about Ignited and maybe even get involved.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. So I'd say, our website is www.ignitededucation.org. And we are just shutting down this year's summer fellowships, but we're quickly ramping up the next round of summer fellowships. So if you're interested in developing your workforce, if you're interested in getting your employees engaged in schools and classrooms, please reach out, because we've got the capability to help you do that. And so I'd say that's the primary thing, is just reach out and we'll work with you to build fellowships and build these relationships with schools.
Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 Perl Script conditional blocks. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my very own co-host in crime, our geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, you have a little plug to do, right?
Yes. Since this show clearly has a STEM theme, I wanted to plug a great book by Travis Taylor and Jody Lynn Nye called Moonbeam. It's part of the Bright Sparks book series. The quick description is what happens when you get one thing you really wanted most in life. A lonely 16-year-old farm girl, Barbara Winton, has been following one reality show for years. Then in an instant, she goes from fangirl to participant when the call comes from Dr. Keegan Bright. She's been selected out of a horde of applicants to join him on the moon. It's a great science fiction story. It has 2 books so far. And it is about STEM with that magic wand because these students are on the moon and they're building all kinds of really cool things. We got to do it on Earth first, but I'd love to see it on the moon someday.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cheever. We also thank you as well. You are that person who drops in each and every week to drop in and listen to our show. And we want to make sure that you get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to get your enterprise news. So go out to our show page right now, twit.tv/Twiat. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, information about the co-hosts, guest information, show notes. And of course, more importantly, next to those videos, you'll actually get those download and subscribe links. Support our show by getting the audio version, the video version, the HD video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast apps. Now, it's the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news for the week. So go ahead and do that now. After you subscribe, share the show with your friends and family and coworkers. Now, we love doing this show, and this is a free and ad-supported show, so subscribing really helps us and the network. Now, after you subscribe, also remember, we do this show live each and every week at 1:30 p.m. Pacific on Fridays. That's at live.twit.tv. Come see how the show is run, things behind the scenes. It's a lot of fun. Now, if you're going to jump in and watch the show live, also remember you can actually jump into our chat room as well. We have a live chat room, irc.twit.tv. We have a bunch of great characters in there. We get a lot of great questions and great content from them. In fact, I have it on my second screen here, and I constantly get some great stuff from there. So go ahead and jump in and join the crowd. Of course, you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM, where you get to see all the latest and greatest I get to do at Microsoft here. And of course, you can always check out dev.office.com to see how you can customize Office and make it more productive for you. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week and doing this Weekend Enterprise Tech, and we really couldn't do this show without them. I also want to thank all the engineers at Twit, and of course, also thank you to our very own Mr. Brian Chee over here. He's our tireless producer. He does all the bookings and plannings for the show, and we really just couldn't do the show without him. Now, of course, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. Now, we started with Victor. Who is the man behind the curtain now?
Jeff Brockman. Say something, Jeff.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good job, guys.
Jeff, has Victor been listening? Or maybe because we normally have this, tradition that we ask what the main topic of the show was.
Victor's working. We're actually making him work this Friday afternoon. But we
right.
do know what the topic of the show is.
What was it?
We're sure that the correct topic is that humans are good at finding patterns, and they should be allowed to do the grading of the voice assistants.
Okay. I would say that would be really close. That would be really close. But and I try. I think it's definitely STEM, but STEM education. But good try, guys. Maybe next time we'll you guys be able to win that time. All right. And of course, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca. Just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.